Hello, my name is Natalia Sandoval, and this is from Deliverista. When Imelda offered to push his chair along the 3 uphill avenues between the charity's office and his bus stop on Lexington, Celso was relieved. He felt weak. Save for the Coke the attorney had offered him during the meeting, his stomach was empty. When Imelda started pushing, Celso whispered towards the heavens a note of gratitude, for the ride but mostly for the new wheelchair he'd received barely days before. The old wheelchair would have certainly embarrassed him, its left wheel so unreliable that it had sprung off the axle midway more than once. It had taken a whole year of paperwork, but the new chair, a donation from the Crime Victim Agency, was much better. Imelda was pretty. It was a real shame he couldn't look at her as she pushed him. Celso couldn't see her face when he asked her where she was from, but she sounded surprised by his question. ¿Yo? Soy mexicana, she said in a strong northern accent that Celso hadn't placed until then. All his life he'd been an avid listener of rancheras. Whenever he listened to radio interviews of his favorite singers, they all spoke with that same accent. Celso told Imelda he had thought she was Colombian or maybe from Spain. The exchange wasn't perfect because he couldn't really see her and he struggled to hear her, against all the loud city street noises, bulldozers and drilling, honks and shouts of angry drivers. Imelda asked him about Azul del Rio and what he would do if he went back there. Celso was not talkative, but he told her what he could. I owe a lot of money to my sister and her husband. I don't know if I'll ever be able to pay them back. I see, Imelda said. Do you miss it there? I do. I guess I'm both nervous and excited to go back. When they arrived at the bus stop, Celso assumed Imelda would get going. He didn't expect her to stay next to him as he waited. Imelda asked him how he felt about filing for the U visa. As I said, I don't think I'll be coming back for the next meeting. The process is too complicated. It will take too much time, too long without healthcare or an income. I don't see the point. I made up my mind. I'm going back to Mexico. It stung a little bit that Imelda would use the respectful form usted in Spanish, putting distance between them. But Celso understood that she was trying to stay professional, for the lines not to be blurred. Though as time passed, she became chattier and pressed him for more details about his village. Where would he live? Did his family have a huertito? What about hens and chickens? What would he do? What kind of fruit trees grew near his house? Were Los Zetas gone from that territory? She'd heard some gruesome stories about killings and kidnappings. Did his family think it would be safe now? I talked to one of my brothers about opening a barber shop, said Celso. That's a great idea, Imelda smiled. Celso didn't understand why Imelda was trying so hard to talk to him. Did she pity him? She was nice, but he was tired, and all he really wanted was to wait for his bus in silence. He had a lot to think about. He was going to the Mexican consulate straight from there. He talked to a person there over the phone, and she told him they could help him find a cheap flight back to Mexico. It was already May. If he waited one more month, the rainy season would begin, and he wouldn't be able to get back for a while. There were no paved roads in his village, only dirt roads. His mind was preoccupied when Imelda started telling him about her father's village. Celso was skeptical. You don't look like a person who comes from a village, he told her. There are many villages in La Sierra where it's common for people to have light eyes and fair skin. There's a nickname in my hometown for people like me, she said. They call us güeros de rancho. Ah, sí? Celso smiled. My father grew up in one of those villages. As a kid, he would tend to the animals early in the morning and then go to school. In the afternoons, he rode a mule from his village to the busiest road and sold tamales. Celso was surprised by Imelda's revelation, by how lively she got when she talked about her father's village. Her eyes shone a mix of nostalgia and pride. Maybe she cared about learning his story, and yet he got a sense that it wasn't really him who she was trying to understand, but herself. What does your father do now? Asked Celso. He's a doctor. A doctor, really? Celso wanted to find something to relate to in Imelda's story, but even if he believed that her father had grown up in a poor village, their current lives were far from similar. He saves children's lives. That last bit she said almost inwardly, in a way that Celso understood was more for her than for him. Imelda thought back to Las Tunas, replaying the images of all those village women lining up outside her father's old house with their children in tow, because the word had gone out that a doctorcito had arrived. She would not see her father for the entire weekend, but she would take pride in watching all those smiling children skipping around the village plaza and happily licking their paletas, those lollipops her father had made a special detour to buy on their way into town. She remembered the day when, as a grown woman already living in New York, she'd been back to Las Tunas with her father, and a man had stopped to greet them. The man had looked down at them from his seat on the saddle of his macho, the brute of a horse and a donkey. On the sides of the animal protruded 2 overflowing sacks filled with calabacitas. The man had looked at her father, then at her, and said in his norteño accent, his words phrased as a question, but really more as a statement, in a voice that contained a mix of disdain, respect, and aspiration. "What did you used to sell back when, doctorcito?" "Tamales," said Imelda's father matter-of-factly, holding his head high. "Tamales," repeated the man, looking at him as if to say, "But look at you now." When the bus arrived, Imelda signaled the driver to lower the platform for Celso. Then she pushed him all the way inside, asking people to clear the way for him, like the bodyguard of an important person. Then she waved goodbye from the bus stop. Celso kept his expression neutral, curling his mouth to the side just a little bit. Would she remember him? Celso thought about all the people who had passed through his life in the last 8 years. Life was so quiet and slow in Azul del Rio. Nothing much ever happened there. Maybe this U-visa thing wasn't such a bad idea after all. At least it would keep his options open. After Celso's bus left, Imelda walked to a nearby bench. Her cell phone vibrated again. This time, she took the call.